You can keep doing what you're doing. It's just you're going to keep getting what you're getting. And so the question is whether you want to keep getting what you're getting or you're willing to change something.
Welcome to a special edition episode of the Game Changing Attorney podcast featuring 5 business titans who've built exceptional organizations.
Many entrepreneurs said they cannot admit that anyone else could do it better than them. And most people would do it better than you. And I think it's a much better belief. Be like, everyone can do everything better than me. It's great. I'm not needed. And that's the point. You want to own the business, not have the business own you.
I'm Michael Mogul, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer. Today, we're revisiting some of our most powerful conversations with visionary entrepreneurs and industry leaders. Their insights will help you build a thriving firm and lead with clarity, focus, and purpose. In this episode, we'll explore the mindsets and strategies that help you turn challenges into opportunities and big goals into real results.
We're operating in a different world today, and those who understand the digital platforms and the ability to transact with customers online, through text, through leads, through database management, will ultimately be the ones that are here tomorrow.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. Before we begin today's episode, I want to remind you that we aren't beholden to any sponsors or run any ads on this podcast. This allows us to present all of our episodes raw and unfiltered. I'm not going to push any made-to-order meal services on you or try to save you any money on your car insurance. That being said, I have one small request. If you receive any value from this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Pay the fee so we can keep this podcast free. Our first guest, Horst Schulze, co-founder of the Ritz-Carlton and a pioneer in world-class hospitality. Horst set the standard for service excellence and leadership in the hotel world. In our conversation, he shared how to build a culture that demands the best and why so many people fall short of excellence.
In fact, I talk to people, they say proudly, we are a good average. What is average? Average is the bottom of goat and top of bad. Why would you not make a decision to be truly excellent in your particular business? That was the vision of the company. I left a great job because I could create that vision for this new company, which eventually was called Ritz-Carlton. But I questioned myself at the same time, and that's a key leadership element. What is your vision for your company? And what is good for all concerned? For the investor, for the employees, for the customer, for society as a whole. That is your responsibility as a leader, to create something that is good for all concerned. And I'm clearly determined that creating the best hotel company in the world would be good, excellent for all concerned. And in that moment, I could not compromise anymore. In that moment, when I knew I come to work, I could not compromise for myself, nor for any individual or any situation. That effort to become the best in the world, because I knew it would be great service, great for all concerned.
I know you talk about that no matter what business you're in, the 3 things that are key to achieving excellence are people, systems, and service. But I'm curious, how would you rank those if you had to rank them 1, 2, and 3?
Well, you cannot do it with either one. I mean, if you imagine, you look at your left and you see a lot of people there. Those are your potential customers and customers. And on the right, there are a lot of people too. Those are your employees. So no matter what business you're in, you have to understand what the customer expects from your product. You have to now make sure that the employee, people, that the employee totally understands what that customer wants from you. And then as managers, you create systems, processes, measurements, controls to make sure that delivery happens. Now, leadership in turn is a situation where the leader creates an environment in which the employee actually wants to do that. So it's people and product. They come together for the benefit of the customer. And the final benefit, of course, for your investors and for all concerned. So you cannot eliminate one of them. That's possible. But in the delivery, the most important thing, by the way, is not the product itself. It's the service. The product has to be excellent. But the real driver of customer loyalty is the service delivery. And there's something, in fact, very fascinating, that we know that 70% of the market would be willing to pay more for the same product if the service is excellent. In other words, if you create a product and your competitor creates the same product, the customer is willing to pay more for your product if you give them good service. That's a relationship element. A service is the moment you make contact with that customer and pay attention to the customer. So service is essential in that equation if I want to have loyal customers.
And on the notion of loyalty, I know that this led to a policy that you'd rolled out, which was a $2,000 policy, which became quite famous. If you could elaborate on what that was.
I can easily elaborate because I will never forget it. When I started, I was sued by owners, hotel owners. Hotel companies don't own hotels. They manage hotels for hotel owners. So Ritz-Carlton, we didn't own the hotels. We managed them. And now I come with a policy where I empowered our employees to be able to make a decision up to $2,000, no matter what employees is. I empower them to make a decision up to $2,000 if there is a problem that the guest experiences, but to keep the problem. You see, a great company really does four things. A truly great organization concentrates, number one, of keeping the customers that you have. Number one. And number two, you find new ones. Number three, you get as much money as you can from the customer without losing them. That means you're giving value. And number four, you do it all efficiently. That's a great company. Now, if I want to keep that customer, if that's number one, and it should be, then I have to move heaven and earth to keep them actually. Then I have to make sure that I empower my employees to make sure that I have loyal customers. We have to understand here, there are three types of customers out there. There's the dissatisfied customer. The dissatisfied customer becomes a terrorist against your company. They can go on the social network today and destroy you. You don't want that. Number two, you have the satisfied customers. They're not yours. They're satisfied with their product, but they may go next door if there's a better offering. And then there is the loyal customer. Well, you don't want to lose them. So what if a customer has a problem and may become a terrorist? If I have an employee who is empowered up to $2,000, that let's say it is the busboy in the morning in a hotel, you can refer it in your business as you want. And the guest comes to in the morning for breakfast. And the busboy says, "Good morning, sir. I hope you have a nice stay." And the guest says, "No, I didn't. There was a lot of noise in the corridor and my TV didn't work." The busboy now is empowered to make sure that customer, we are not going to lose that customer. The busboy now can say, "Please forgive me, sir." In fact, that's all of our employees were certified to do it that way. "Please forgive me, sir. In fact, I feel so bad, I will buy a breakfast." This customer, who may have become a terrorist, now becomes an ambassador. To me, that's worth a lot of money. That's why all were empowered up to $2,000. Now, the $2,000 were given only once by an incident that I describe in my book. Nobody ever gave $2,000. We sent fruit basket to the room. We sent some cookies to the room. We bought a glass of wine or bought breakfast. And all that are a few dollars to keep a loyal customer. Now, I also knew, frankly, I know who our customer was. The average age was only 44 years old. I knew they may travel another 30 years. They had the potential of spending $200,000 by themselves lifetime with us. Why wouldn't I move heaven and earth to keep them? When I did it, that created like a nuclear explosion. Everybody said, "Are you crazy?" My vice president I said, no, I want to keep the customer. But of course, we then went to teaching our employees how to handle it. We certified each employee how to do problem resolution.
And I believe with this policy, it actually led to, from the employees, incredible acts that really drove customer loyalty. I remember you stated at one point, if you could share the story of like the couple that was on their honeymoon in Cancun.
Yeah. That was a fun story because I enjoyed that personally. Because sure enough, the groom lost his ring on the beach the first day he went there. Now, you can imagine. Everybody was digging. The more you dig for it, the whole beach was looking for it. The more you dig, the more it gets lost. You can also imagine the tears. But after beach time, the 4 beach attendants, they didn't have to ask. They went and bought 4 metal detectors and found the ring. Now, they spent $500. So what? We got millions of worth of advertising promotions out of it. What would have happened without the empowerment? They would have gone, asked permission to the general manager. The general manager would have said, we won't find it anyway. Okay, buy 1 metal detector. And they would have found it. They were empowered to make their decision immediately after, ran, and before the night break, they found the ring. And the next morning, the couple found it on their table for breakfast. And the joy and the excitement, he called every newspaper. He said, it was PR fabulously. We couldn't have bought that kind of advertising. So there's so many beautiful stories what happened because of this empowerment. We taught problem resolution. It's very simple. The first thing we taught is listen if the guests have a problem. Listen, attentive. Don't look the other way when you see something, but look them in the eye and listen. Show empathy next. Apologize next. You own the complaint if you get it, even if it wasn't your area. Please forgive me. And next, make amends. And next, delight. Delight, buying the breakfast and sitting for us, we delight and saying sorry. A busboy saying sorry and saying, please forgive me. And buying breakfast, that guest will be overwhelmed. And instead of becoming terrorists, they become an ambassador.
Horst Schulze showed us how empowering your team and leading with service can transform a business. But how do you make sure your foundation is strong from the start? That's where Marcus Lemonis comes in. He's the CEO of Camping World and the host of CNBC's The Prophet and The Fixer on Fox. Known for his no-nonsense approach, Marcus stands by the 3 core pillars of any successful business: people, process, and product. During our conversation, I asked him to break down what each one means and why they matter.
I always philosophically knew that the people mattered and the process of how you run your business mattered and the product mattered. But I'll take an extra minute and sort of break it down for people. When I talk about people, process, and product, it's really quite simple. And I wanted to dumb it down for educational purposes so that people can hear it and see it and swallow it in a way that's digestible. But the layman's version of it is, you can't be in a business and sell a product or a service that people don't need or can't relate to. And the silliest example would be if I told you that I was going to open up a company and sell 8-track cassettes. I'm going to have an amazing supply chain process. My people are spectacular. We have a great system inside of our business. Process is refined. Our marketing is great. But the reality of it is that people don't want 8-tracks. So the product has to be relevant. It has to be market competitive, and it has to be something that people actually want today and tomorrow. On the process side, it really is simple as, how do you take a relevant product or service? And I can use legal services as an example. How do you take that service and deliver it to the consumer in a way that they're not intimidated by it, the way that they understand it, and the way that they'll accept it, adopt it, embrace it, and engage? And ultimately, we all think about the practice of law or the practice of medicine. And as consumers, we want to know that we're going to be able to understand it financially and understand what we want out of it and how it's going to be delivered to us. So we've gotten through the process and the product, and that's sort of the easy part. The hard part for me was always trying to explain to people how people, the people that actually run the business, the people that actually transact with the company, the vendors that support the business, or the guy or the gal that owns it, ultimately determine if the product or the process get executed or not. And if I liken it to something very simple, like a lemonade stand, we all know what a lemonade stand looks like, and we all know what lemonade tastes like. But if we don't engage with the person selling the lemonade, and we don't buy off on why we're buying it from them, we don't have a relationship with them, and they don't engage with us in a way that's understandable and non-intimidating, we won't buy their lemonade. And so it's funny because this is the first time that I've actually thought about applying my 3 Ps to the legal field. And some people would say, look, a lawyer has a bad rap, which I think they do. They're delivering a protective service to the community. I want to be clear with what I mean by that. A protective service, not a housekeeping service or a car mechanic service or a doctor service, but a protective service that's ultimately going to advance my business or advance my family. One of the two. And I need to understand how to deliver that in a way. And I always wanted to be a lawyer. In fact, in the summer between my high school years, I worked at a law firm in downtown Miami. I worked in the mailroom. And I remember people saying to me, you're wasting your time working in the mailroom. And I learned early on that I was understanding how the entity operated. And I understood how the personalities interacted. And I got a chance to see all these different people. And as years went on, I started doing more. For me, the best job I ever had, no BS, was working in the law firm to understand how this firm represented families and businesses that were in crisis, that were in growth mode, that were in dispute, that needed to protect an idea that they had. And that ultimately gave me the gateway to how to framework things as I move forward in business. Most people are intimidated by lawyers. Sometimes I am too, I guess, especially when they chase me and they want to, pursue things from me. But in most cases, I see them as assets and resources. And that's why the people side of things matter, because if you have a relationship with somebody that's more than transactional, it ultimately works.
And Marcus, I want to almost go back in the story, if we may, or I guess this is even present day, because today you're the CEO of Camping World, multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company that, with you at the helm, has not only grown exponentially, but it continues to become more and more profitable. So I saw a recent earnings announcement, and I think it's fantastic. If you look back on that, are there certain key decisions that you've made that you can attribute this, let's say, sustainable growth and profitability to?
I think the recognition of my mistakes were probably the most important thing to push the business forward. And I think a lot of leaders are often hesitant to take the full brunt of a mistake squarely on your forehead or squarely on your chest. And we so often blame it on market conditions, or we blame it on COVID, or we blame it on the economy, or we blame it on our people, or we blame it on our competitors. And the reality of it is that if I look at my 20 years in building the business from a zero business to a $7 billion business, from a business that made no money to a business that will make north of 600 million this year, I really had to have a strong dose of humility and reality to the good decisions I made, but more importantly, to the mistakes that I made that cost the business money, that put it in peril, that caused it harm. It's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to stomach. And I would say in the early part of my career, I struggled to do that. I struggled to look myself in the mirror and admit, like, man, I really whiffed that one. Like, that was bad. And the business is going to lose $100 million. The unfortunate part of doing that, and maybe the most important takeaway in this lesson, is that the acknowledgement of the mistake isn't something that you could ever erase. It isn't something that anybody's going to ever forget. And it will always be something that people will throw back in your face. It shouldn't change the way you move forward. It's something that requires you to build thick skin. It's something that should cause you to have more temperance when you're going to make the next decision. But when you're an entrepreneur and you're a risk taker and you're a leader, what it usually does is nothing. The acknowledgement ends up being more for your humility and more for your people to see that you don't have all the answers. But I would say that the acknowledgement of my several mistakes is what's allowed the business to blossom long-term.
So from the early childhood business of selling candy to now leading thousands of employees across multiple cities, I have to ask, I mean, what's that experience like? I mean, is there anything that can prepare you for that? And, on the other side of this, you work with a lot of small businesses and smaller teams. What are the biggest differences between what you experience in Camping World versus the businesses you help?
The 12,000 or 13,000 employees that we have at Camping World and the size of the business is nothing more than extra zeros. The principles behind running a small coffee shop and running a $7 billion business are ultimately the same. Yes, the product you're selling is different. And yes, there's a bigger system and a bigger infrastructure. But the theories, I think, they're relatively the same. And when I look at the lessons from running a candy business to running a $7 billion business, I'm not sure that they're really different. That the problems are more complex and the resources are more bountiful. And so the downside of running a small business is that you're really lacking a lot of resources in your mind. And you walk into a scenario where you believe that you can't compete with somebody bigger than you because your bank account is smaller, because your internet site is smaller, because your buying power is smaller, because your marketing prowess is lower, because your talent pool is different. And I think all the things that I just mentioned, quite frankly, end up just being nothing more than excuses. That's really what they are. And I think what's helped me help smaller businesses, because I hate to call them small as if they're not important, but what's helped smaller size businesses is to take all these learnings and all these mistakes and all these challenges that I've had in my own life and remind them that really 2 + 2 is 4, no matter what the size of the business is. Interacting with an employee is the same regardless of the size of the business. Responding to a lead with a customer and doing it in a professional manner and a timely manner has nothing to do with the size of the business. And this idea that small or big should dictate the way you run your business, I think, is a bit flawed.
I wanted to ask you, if you were the CEO of a law firm today, what would be your top priority?
Funnel and lead management would be the most important thing that I want to know. We're dealing in a world where there's a lot of noise out there. And there's different types of lawyers. We all know that there's different types of lawyers, and they're all fighting for business. And I prefer law firms that are protecting and serving than creating and doing other things. I really want law firms to understand the business they have today, how they're going to work on the retention of it and service those accounts, and not have the customer feel like they're just going to get billed to death. I like to find law firms who understand the art of acquisition and how they're going to dollar cost average down the cost of a lead. And I also want to understand how they're managing lead management. I would argue with any law firm in America, what is the difference between running a car dealership and running a law firm as it relates to getting a customer lead through the call, click, or come in model and how you're going to process them? If you're a law firm today and you don't have a CRM and you don't have database management and you don't catalog your leads and follow up with them and retain the customers you have today and service your biggest clients, then you're really not a law firm anymore. We're operating in a different world today. And those who understand the digital platforms and the ability to transact with customers online, through text, through leads, through database management, will ultimately be the ones that are here tomorrow. Granted, you still have to be a good lawyer. Granted, you still have to operate with the highest level of ethics. Granted, you still have to be able to market yourself. But when you get that lead, what are you doing with it? And I know of a lot of law firms that don't have systems in place today for lead funnel management, for database management, for retention management, for reputation management. And if they want to operate in 2025, they better get on those things. That's my opinion.
Marcus Lemonis shows us that no matter the size of your business, growth starts with getting people, process, and product right. But what about the mindset of the leader? That's where Alex Hormozi comes in. He's scaled companies past 100 million and knows what separates the best founders apart. I asked Alex how to stay motivated when you're constantly facing adversity.
I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, if there's a couple of key themes in the messages that I want to put out is that like there's a lot of positive jargon that's put out by in social media and influencers, et cetera, like follow your passion. But the thing is like when you're starting out, everything sucks. Like everything sucks. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and sadness comes from not knowing what to do. right? It's a feeling of hopelessness. Like you don't know what steps to take, which really just means it comes from ignorance. And when you're new, you don't know anything. So of course you're ignorant. Of course you don't know what to do, which leads to like very deep depression for a lot of entrepreneurs at different times in their careers. Most guys who are starting out are thinking there's something wrong with them because they're not passionate. But my probably singular message is use pain, because most entrepreneurs don't need to look very far to find the pain in their lives. Anger, shame, fear, resentment, whatever it is, anxiety. Like we have different things that have fueled us in our lives, and I would rather have people just use what they have, because I think that is, in essence, what entrepreneurship is about, is being resourceful, not really necessarily about having resources. And if we consider passion a resource as a requirement to be successful, I just don't think it's true. I think you need fuel, and you should use whatever fuel you have. And I think over time, if you get your head above water, you'll be able to find a different fuel. But I think that away from fuel is more powerful than towards fuel. It's not necessarily sustainable, but in the beginning, you just need to move. And so a lot of ways that can get you to move.
Yeah. And I know you've worked with many different founders. I mean, in all sorts of different businesses, services-based businesses, software. I mean, the full gamut. Like, are there any particular traits that you've seen in the most successful founders that kind of separate the most successful from the least successful?
Yeah, they're humble. If you have humility, you can do a lot, because if somebody's humble, then they can accept feedback. If they can accept feedback, then they can change. I mean, it's very difficult to, basically, if someone doesn't have humility, then it means that whoever they are day one has to be the person that they need to be at day 1,000. Because if they can't admit a deficit, then they can't improve. And so humility is by far the biggest one. Beyond that, they have to have drive. They have to have some reason that they're going to do it, whether it's, away from fuel or towards fuel. Like they have to have some sort of drive. There's a big study on this that I've been quoted a lot for, even though it's not my study. But it's, the three most common traits that they've seen. It's not the early wake up time. It's not a lot of, it's not the healthy eating. It's not the cold plunges or the affirmations, but the three common traits are that they had a superiority complex. So they believe that they can do big things. They want to chase after big goals. The second is that they have crippling insecurity and that they feel they'll never be enough, and that they have impulse control. And so if you have a big goal and you have big fuel and you don't stray the path and you do it for a very long period of time, you'll probably win.
Yeah. It's almost like, I think there's a book, it's called like The Manic Edge, to a degree, it's like you almost have to be crazy in a sense. I mean, you think about entrepreneur, the idea of starting a business, the risk that you take on. I mean, obviously, I think Shark Tank maybe has popularized this to an extent, but when you look at the reality of it, it's not always a great proposition. I mean, I think now with a lot of like social media culture, it's this idea of, working remotely from your laptop. Everybody's making 40 grand a month. I don't know why people get stuck on this number, but I don't know that it really depicts an accurate portrayal of what this journey is.
Yeah, well, I think the average, I think the average small business owner takes home like $50,000 a year. I mean, the average small business owner makes the same as the median household income. So, from that sense, it's one person versus a household. So I guess in that sense, they make a little bit more money. They also take on significantly more risk personally in order to do that. So I agree with you. I think that I think right now it's in vogue. It's cool. I mean, it is the way to make the most money. It's also the way to lose the most money. So it is, at definition, the highest risk, highest reward game. But, to quote Warren Buffett, I think the reason business is so risky is because people don't know what they're doing. And that's kind of the nature of it, is that when you start, you're ignorant. Biggest debt you pay is the tax of not knowing, right? You're not knowing what you do. He also says that it's only risky if you don't know what you're doing. And so once you do know what you're doing, then there's not nearly as much risk in business. But the only way to know what you're doing is to get in the game, which means you have to incur lots of risk to get in. And then the more you play, the better you get, and the less risky it is, and the higher reward is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like in many cases, it's like the solution's making good decisions. How do you make good decisions? Experience. How do you gain experience? Bad decisions. And, right. And the cycle repeats. Something you shared before that I thought was very interesting is just the differences between how the most successful people view time and their approach to time horizon. If you could elaborate on that.
You can pretty easily tell how successful an entrepreneur is by looking at two elements of time. One is the increments of time they speak in. So if they talk in decades, they talk in multiple decades, they talk in lifetimes, they talk in generations, I can almost guarantee you it's going to be a significantly more successful entrepreneur than the one who talks about next week, next month, and even next quarter. And it's such a small thing, but it's pervasive. Like you can hear it in conversation. You can immediately know, oh, this guy's only doing this much, because the only way to do really big things is to think on a much longer time horizon. The second component is how they manage the micro, which is if you look at someone's calendar and how they allocate their most scarce resource, which is time, you can see where they're going to be in 6 or 12 months. So if you look at the calendar as the balance sheet of someone's time asset and how they allocate it, their time budget, then you will see where they're going to get their returns. And so if we look at a founder and we look at their calendar, we can tell how the company's going. We can usually see how we need to fix it, because fundamentally most entrepreneurs work all the hours of the day. Most of them do, right? And so if they're not making the amount of money that they want to make, it's because they're doing the wrong stuff. And that's usually the biggest issue. And they think they need to work harder, but they've already maxed out their hours, which means fundamentally they're wrong. They're seeing a distorted reality. They think this is going to work and it is not.
Are there particular things that you see? I mean, just even looking like at an entrepreneur's calendar where you're like, okay, well that, you can tell right away, okay, this is not optimized or the focus isn't in the right place. Like what types of things stick out?
Well, the single common trait that every entrepreneur has to get over time is relinquishing control. So entrepreneurship is a continual giving up of control at all levels. And so whatever they're doing is usually the thing that they need to be able to give up and transfer to somebody else in order to get further and further above the business and get more leverage. And so in the beginning, you have to give up delivery, or you have to give up selling, or you have to give up promoting, you have to give up something, or administrative tasks. And you look at your calendar and you say, which of these things is most easy to replace in the marketplace and is the cheapest one that I can replace? And you replace the first one that gives you the most time for the least amount of money. And then you're like, great, now I should fill my time up with the thing that makes me more money. And fundamentally, that is the game, is you just continue to trade up the time until you have bought all of your time back, and then you can just do all the highest level leverage activities, and leverage just being defined as getting more for what you put in.
Yeah. Now, this is a concept that I think when people hear it, they probably will nod along, and yet you and I both know this. I think so many entrepreneurs struggle with it and struggle with that relinquishment of control. No one can do it as well as they can. No one can do it, quite the way they do. What's the answer there? Like, how do you get somebody to the point where they actually start doing it?
Confrontation. This is why you're poor. Like, you can keep doing what you're doing. It's just, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. And so the question is whether you want to keep getting what you're getting or you're willing to change something. I mean, it's the same as somebody trying to lose weight saying, I want to keep eating the same diet, but it might look the same. You're like, yeah. So you have a diet of time that you continue to eat or let something else eat your time every single day. And you expect the outcome to look different. And it's just not true. And so I think just a very logical breakdown where someone just you have to confront it. You have to confront reality. And a lot of entrepreneurs are delusional, sometimes in a good way. You have to be optimistically delusional in a certain capacity to be an entrepreneur. But a lot of times that delusion takes control and they believe the false statements that you just said, right? Which is like, no one can do it like I can do it. I'm irreplaceable, et cetera, et cetera. But like every single human on planet Earth is replaced in 100 years.
Yeah.
And the likelihood is that if you were doing it and you're also doing other things, then somebody doing full-time what you're doing will be better than you are. And I can virtually guarantee that 100 people doing full-time what you're doing are going to be better than you are. So a little side quest here. A lot of entrepreneurs learn the wrong lessons from experiences. So we talked about having experiences earlier, right? And you make the lesson, et cetera. But the thing is that most people learn the wrong lessons. So I'll give you an example. Small business owner hires the first salesperson. They're like, I'm going to give up control of sales. I'm going to give it to this person. They're going to start selling. And of course, the person tanks. Okay. Because they also don't know how to hire, manage, recruit, train salespeople because they don't have that skill set yet either. But they bring this person on, the person fails, right? There's lots of lessons you can get from that. But one lesson that's common is that salespeople don't work. Right? Or no salesperson can sell like I can, right? And so then, as soon as they have that belief, forever, until that belief is changed, they will not make more money. And the thing is there's a lot of those salesman beliefs at every single level of entrepreneurship. But the correct lesson is phrasing the thing that didn't work as deficiency personally, which is, okay, this salesman didn't work. I do not know how to, and then insert the problem. Recruit, hire, train, manage a salesperson. Great. That's solvable. Let's go solve that. And then that is the process all the way up. But you have to admit it. It's like AA, right? You got to admit you have a problem. And until they do, and that's where the humility comes into play, and that's what plateaus. Many entrepreneurs, they cannot admit that anyone else could do it better than them. And most people could do it better than you. And I think it's a much better belief. Be like, everyone can do everything better than me. It's great. I'm not needed. And that's the point. You want to own the business, not have the business own you.
Alex Hormozi gave us an inside look at the entrepreneurial mindset and why letting go of control can be a superpower. Now we shift to the employee experience with Joey Coleman, author of Never Lose a Customer Again and Never Lose an Employee Again. Joey helps businesses turn team members into advocates by creating remarkable experiences that keep top talent in your organization. During our conversation, I asked Joey to walk us through the 8 phases of the employee journey.
The reason all of them start with A is because I want employers to kind of think that if you get each of these phases right, it's like getting straight A's on your report card. Your employees are feeling that you're firing on all cylinders and you're delivering across the entire experience. So we start with phase one, the assess phase. This is when a prospective employee is trying to decide whether or not they want to come work for you. They're looking at your job description, your one ad, your classified ad. They're getting a feel for the position and role. They're probably going on the careers page or the About Us page on your website to get a feel for, well, what kind of people do you employ and what's the culture like in your organization? In this day and age, they're probably checking to see if they know anyone on LinkedIn that already works at your organization that they can get some inside scoop about. And then they're going through your hiring process, whether that's submitting an application, submitting a resume, filling out a form, letting you know that they're interested in the position, and then going through whatever your hiring process is as far as submitting videos, submitting portfolios, doing interviews, all of the things that are leading up to a decision on whether or not they're the right fit for your organization, which brings us to phase two, the accept phase. In the accept phase, two interesting things happen. The employer says, this is the person I want, and they extend an offer. And if we're lucky, that candidate accepts the offer. They transition from being a prospective employee to being an actual employee. We then come to phase three, Michael, which this is a phase that most business owners, to be frank, don't spend any time thinking about. We've all probably heard of the concept buyer's remorse. Phase three in an employee context, the affirm phase, is new hires remorse. The scientifically proven fact that immediately after accepting a job offer, a new employee begins to doubt the decision they just made. I mean, it literally happens in the seconds after they sign their offer letter. Why is this? Well, a couple of things happen. Number one, the dopamine release that comes with getting the offer, that excitement, that joy, that euphoria starts to fade along with the dopamine receding from the brain. And now they feel fear and doubt and uncertainty about the choice they just made. Should I have negotiated for a better deal? They said this is all they could offer and this are the usual benefits, but if I would have pushed more, could I have gotten more? It's also the case that top talent is probably interviewing at a lot of different places at the same time. And so when they accept your job offer, there are probably outstanding interviews they've done that haven't resulted in an offer yet. And they're wondering, well, if I wait a little longer, is that the one that would have been the better thing? And so that fear and doubt and uncertainty that they're feeling is usually matched by what from the employer? Oh, that'd be very little communication. We've said, hey, we've got the job offer. Great. We want you to start 3 weeks from now on Wednesday. There's no other communication happening. So in that affirm stage, we need to affirm their choice to work with us. We then come to phase four, the activate stage. Now, this is the first official day on the job when they show up for work. And the secret here is to keep in mind the immortal words of country music legend Bonnie Raitt. Give them something to talk about. What are you going to do to create an experience that is so remarkable that when they get home that night after their first day at work, whether that's to a spouse, their kids, their significant other, their parents, a roommate, when that loved one asks them, how was it? What was the first day like? You want them to have stories to tell. You want them to have things that they're excited about. What's fascinating is 74% of employees say that their experience on the first day determines whether they will stay for a month or not. 74%. These are shocking. And it all boils down to that one day. We then come to phase five, the acclimate phase. Now, what's interesting, Michael, in the acclimate phase is this starts with the second day on the job and lasts for weeks, even months, depending on the role and the position. In almost every organization on the planet, there's someone who's responsible for the first day on the job. When I go to those same organizations and I say, great, who's responsible for the second day on the job? It's like cue the tumbleweed, crickets. No one's responsible for that. So what are you doing to help acclimate those folks to this new role, their responsibilities, the relationships they're going to have in the organization? And how are we building that over time instead of trying to fire hose them all in the first day? After they acclimate, ideally we come to phase six, accomplish, where the employee achieves the goal they had when they originally decided to work for you. See, every employee has a vision of what they're hoping to accomplish. But as employers, are we tracking that? Are we paying attention to that? Are we marking their progress and calling out the milestones that they achieve? Probably not as much as we could. We then come to phase seven, the adopt phase. This is when the employee becomes loyal to you and only you. Most people listening to this podcast or watching this show will realize that they have some employees that are adopters. They're loyal, they're committed. What have you done to tell them that you recognize their commitment? What have you done to show them the appreciation for their loyalty and commitment? It's not enough to just keep paying their check. And last but not least, we finally come to phase 8, the advocate phase. This is when the employee becomes a raving fan singing your praises far and wide. Few key things to look at in the advocate phase. Number 1, how many of your employees are unprompted going on and writing reviews on Glassdoor? Are they writing them because they're excited, or are they writing them because you asked them to write them? Number 2, how many of your employees are referring new people to you? Lots of times when I work with my consulting clients, they'll say, oh, Joey, our employees are all advocates. I'm like, great. Let's look at the last time you had an open position. How many of the candidates you interviewed came from internal referrals versus your marketing and promotion efforts? Cue tumbleweed again. They're like, oh, well, only 1 or 2, but that's maybe because, well, it's probably because you actually don't have advocates, or the advocate didn't even know you were hiring. A huge percentage of employees say they don't even know what positions their employer is currently hiring for. This is low-hanging fruit for any organization. The last thing I'll say when it comes to advocates is advocates aren't just limited to your W-2 employees. Advocates can be anyone who ever worked for your organization. And the best thing you can do as an employer is to make your offboarding when an employee leaves as remarkable as the onboarding was when they came in. So many employers, it's like, oh, you're leaving? Let me throw a match and burn that bridge. You're dead to me. I never want to talk to you again. And it's like, why not have that person as an advocate in the marketplace who, when asked, hey, where's a great place to work? Or I'm thinking about applying at this place. They go, oh my gosh, that was the best place I ever worked. They're amazing there. You should totally apply. If we get these 8 phases right, we get increased productivity, increased engagement, and the type of retention that most employers are looking for.
And I appreciate you, especially that last part, because that was going to be my next question, and just building the case for doing this, because I imagine there's going to be a lot of people who listen to this and they say, wow, that sounds like a lot. I don't even know where to get started. It's going to require a lot of time. This might require a lot of money. What would you say to that?
It's definitely going to require attention and effort. Time depends on how deep you want to go. Money, don't get caught up in that, because a lot of this stuff you can do for less than $100. It's more about you making the concerted decision as the employer that I want to create remarkable experiences for my people. It's never about the money you spend on them. It's about the emotions they feel when they interact with you. So what are we doing to kind of create that connection? And don't just take my word for it. Research that was commissioned by Glassdoor shows that employees who have a strong onboarding experience, so we get that first 100 days right and they feel connected to the organization, it's an 80% increase in productivity and a 70% increase in retention. I don't know about you, Michael, but I don't want to just be the guy who's like, oh, love on your people, treat your employees well. That's great. But the CFO, the bean counter in your office is saying, well, show me the money, Joey. Where does this? It leads to less money being spent on hiring new people. Because to me, one of the most shocking statistics in the book is the cost of hiring a new employee is somewhere between 100 and 300% of that employee's annual salary. This is real money. This isn't just like, oh, it's all about emotions and feelings. Yes, that's part of it, but it's about your bottom line as well.
Joey Coleman showed us how the employee experience shapes the strength of your organization. But how do you create a culture where innovation can thrive? That's where Kara Goldin comes in. She's the founder of Hint Water and built the brand from the ground up with no prior experience in the beverage industry. Known for her fearless approach to business, I asked Kara how she faces what can seem to be insurmountable challenges head on.
I have a timeline that I've gone through with the team, especially new team members, where I'll look at situations, I'll set goals, right? And then you go and you achieve that. A Starbucks was one of those where I thought one day they're going to have something else besides coffee in here. We're going to get in these cases and we're going to have Hint in there. And I eventually achieved those goals. But I think when those goals happen, even if you are successful, even if you feel like you know what success is for the other side of the table in a situation, sometimes things come up and they just explode, right? That you get, in this case, we got kicked out of Starbucks. We had like a year and a half of traction in there and we were doing great and everything was awesome. And then it wasn't. And I think that when you get in a situation where that happens and it happens to you enough, that's when you sit there and think about, well, what could I have done? And I think the question and the answer to that is that you have options. Because when you don't have lots of clients, when you don't have lots of competitors to Starbucks, when you're putting all your eggs in one basket, then those surprises end up being detrimental to the life of your company. That's kind of the key thing that I've learned along the way, is that always have options. Because when you don't have options, that's when you feel like they've got you by the throat, right? And then you make bad decisions because you've got to stay alive, right? And I think like no one ever wants to be in those situations, but I think it's always important to be thinking about, how do I diversify? How do I not have all my distribution in Google, even though it's an incredible place to be and place to start? How do I go find more of those? And I think just always be on your toes finding those. I'm sure in your business too, right? Especially when everything is great, you just think like, okay, I'm going to kick back.
It's interesting because at our recent conference, I shared kind of the story of Crisp and all the lessons learned. And what was interesting to me as I was reflecting on that when we were creating the presentation, at least in my case, I found that after every great thing that had happened, after every kind of, I guess, leap that the business had made, on the other side of that was some huge bit of adversity that I did not even know was waiting for me. And the cycle would repeat. Like, so basically something amazing would happen. I'd feel that every problem was solved right before a massive problem, larger than anything I could have imagined, was looming. And then we'd solve that problem. And then I'd think, okay, we're getting the hang of this. And then another massive problem. And it's literally that year after year after year after year, things that, at first blindsided me. Now I've come to expect them. It sounds like you've had a similar journey in the sense that after every great thing, so like in the example of Starbucks, you get like distribution at all these Starbucks, and then I guess what Howard Schulze decides they want to add food to the Starbucks offerings, right? They need to free up some like refrigeration real estate, right? So then they pull Hint, but things like that. I'm just curious, what are those days like for you, and then how do you bounce back from them?
They don't stay bad for very long. And it sounds like you've had those situations too, where it really is a cycle. And that's what it's so great to be able to go back and share those stories too. Because I think oftentimes I think there's still a lot of people out there that don't want to talk about, their challenges or their failures. And I think that if you can actually be upfront about those, first of all, I think opening up is kind of your own therapy session, right? Where you talk about it, and it's definitely got some challenges. People are going to learn from them. They'll ask you questions that maybe you haven't been maybe a lot of times you have been asked, but other times you haven't been asked along the way. The key thing is to know that dark days don't last forever, and that you have to be open to what's coming next. And I think in so many situations, I could say that I didn't see it coming, to your point, where, you feel blindsided or whatever, but often I don't see the light coming. And I know that the light is even brighter because I had a dark moment, right? And I'm such a huge believer in that. And it's, when you think about it, it's very exciting. And I think that's what you have to believe. But instead, if you just sit and you think, I'm a failure, I've always got challenges, my life sucks, whatever, then I don't think you're open to the new things. I think you've got to open yourself up and know that there's things that are coming around the corner. You've got to wake up every morning and think about, okay, what are the things that I want to go accomplish that maybe I didn't know that I had time to do, or hadn't really, blue sky things like a lot. And the more you do that, the more you're going to find your good, your light.
And as all of this is happening, because one of the things that really stuck out to me was the brand that you had developed in Hint. Like, did you ever expect that to happen, of just not people just enjoying the product, but literally like the brand that would take off, and then also seeing it not just in Silicon Valley, but in businesses really all over the country and beyond? What are your thoughts on the brand itself? How much of that was by design?
from the beginning, I had this idea. I mean, it's funny. Somebody was just asking me this question the other day that they're like, how did you decide to put the hint down the side of the bottle? I had this vision that for hint should just be on the side. I don't know. Like I didn't know a lot about label design or anything, but I really looked around at a lot of different products in stores. And I think for me, I just thought that I'll just keep trying it. It's interesting in the food and beverage industry. One thing that I've really believed is kind of different than the tech industry is that there's this idea that when you launch something that you don't change it. In the tech industry, it's updates 2.0. Go back to Apple again. I always tell people that there's like at least 2 iterations of the iPhone that is sitting in a safe inside of Apple offices right now that is just watching how the consumers respond to this iPhone. And that's not true in food and beverage, right? They just create an entirely new brand. Maybe they change like a sweetener after they start seeing sales fall or whatever. But for me, I just kept thinking, let's just get it on the shelf. Let's see how consumers respond to something. And then we'll just change it over time. And I think like taking what I've learned from the tech industry and bringing it into a different industry and not having the experience too is something that a lot of people can learn from. That now we've seen it in many companies. Look at Warby Parker, for example. Those guys didn't work at Luxottica. Many, many others over the years. I mean, I know you're friends with Gary Vaynerchuk. I mean, Gary didn't come from the wine industry, right? He liked wine. He had ideas about it. And then he went and thought about a different way to actually get it in people's hands. So bringing in a different mindset, bringing in something unique. It's interesting because it takes a lot of courage, because I think that the conventional wisdom and what you hear from family and friends in particular when you've got an idea and you want to share it with people is you don't know anything. Like you haven't been in that industry. You're going to fail. It's going to cost a lot of money. How are you going to go up against Coke and Pepsi? How are you going to go up against, the big guys? And I think you just have to figure out that it's okay to try, right? And see what happens. And I think that's true with every successful person out there that is doing something a little bit different.
I hope these conversations with Horst, Marcus, Alex, Joey, and Kara gave you a new perspective on your business and how to grow. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that I can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of my book absolutely free at GameChangingAttorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot me a text at 404-531-7691 and I'll answer any question that you've got for me. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it'll help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on this episode, see the show notes in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.